Time is ticking towards the legalization of recreational marijuana, and this week, 2 more Canadian provinces unveiled their plans on how they will sell weed to us. And they're very different than Ontario's plan. Does that mean that we're going the right way when it comes to weed? Toronto Star Queen's Park columnist Martin Reg-Con joins me now to talk more about cannabis and cannabis regulations. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure.
So, first of all, when we look at what Quebec has done, I think a lot of people are surprised that they were a lot more draconian, perhaps, than Ontario, and much more strict.
Stunning. You think of Quebec as being the distinct society, and they like their spirits, they like their beer. They've had beer in corner stores decades before Ontario had it. We still don't have it in corner stores. So it came as a surprise. And interesting, the polling data shows that Quebecers are more apprehensive about marijuana. The government of the day, the Liberal government there, the health minister talking down marijuana and concerns about young people. The opposition party, the CAQ, also saying this is going too far, too fast. So yeah, that was a surprise. And in many ways, they are mirroring what Ontario was doing because they're keeping it in the family of the provincial booze retailer, and in that sense it'll be very similar. The one difference that's interesting is that I believe you'll be able to smoke outdoors in Quebec, unlike in Ontario, where you really have to do it in-house. So you can be in a public park and have it, for example.
There's going to be no provision for growing your own, which there is in Ontario. There's zero tolerance for any driver that tests positive for THC, which is interesting because THC can remain in your system for a long time, so it's difficult to see how that will beat a charter challenge in terms of being able to say, no, you're impaired, and you say, well, what? I mean, Ross Rebelliati has a gold medal and he tested positive. I mean, I think that's coming.
Good point.
But let's look at Alberta, because they've gone now in a more expected way for Alberta in a privatized, so they're going to put the privatized section in there.
Yeah, and I think the prairie provinces, British Columbia, are in a sense mirroring what they already have. They already have a mixed hybrid system for retailing of alcohol. So it's not a big surprise that they are sticking essentially to that. The Quebec model was a little more of a surprise. And in that sense, Ontario is more or less mimicking what it already has in place. Every province is so complicated, and Ontario had its own beer store weirdness, and so that made it complicated here as well.
But let's talk about Ontario's plan, because what the plan says is that we are going to establish standalone stores operated by the LCBO. Now, the capital outlay here is going to be significant for Ontario, much more than it will be for Alberta.
True, and we have to get used to saying the OCRC, right, for the Ontario Cannabis Retail Corporation. You're right, that's a lot of capital being allocated for that. There will also be significant revenues coming in, so I'm not worried about the government losing out on this. And maybe there is a price to pay for rolling it out in a controlled way. Look, it's easy to suggest, and it's tempting to suggest, that you can just let the existing playing field continue, where you have dispensaries out there that continue to do business as they have in the last year or two. And I think Ontario, backed up by what's happening in Quebec, is manifesting a caution and saying, look, we've had decades of prohibition. We don't need to go right away from prohibition to stimulation of supply. Let's just keep it under control, literally and figuratively speaking. We will have online sales that allow people to get access from wherever they are in the province. But you're right, it is going to be expensive, and I'm not sure, you had the economic statement on the program today. I didn't see in the sort of mini budget any significant revenues coming yet from cannabis.
Oh, but I mean, and this, I want to move to the sort of hypocrisy about this, because the government, both on the federal side and here in Ontario, cannot stress enough that this is not about making money. I mean, Mr. Sousa will tell you, well, I'm not expecting any money from this. But you talk to the people who work in this sector, and there's money being made. Yeah. There's a lot of money. So what's true? So,
look, any politician who tells you they're not interested in the money is you wonder what they're smoking. But in serious terms, I don't see the windfall coming right away from marijuana sales. It might come down the road. The reason for that is, you mentioned capital outlays, and there's a reason, by the way, for having that store system, in-house LCBO style system, which is you actually might save a fair bit in regulation, because regulating the private sector won't be that easy, and avoiding clashes with zoning and so on. If you contract that out to the private sector, that has its costs as well. But in terms of the revenue picture, at the outset, this new monopoly has to drive the black market out of business. And so they do have to price low,
and
predatory pricing.
We have two quick things because I don't see any evidence that they can do what they say to be able to eliminate the dispensaries. They haven't been able to do so far, so why would the new regime do that? And I guess the second thing is, can we not be so puritanical about this? Can we not bring back the LCBO from the mid-70s where you're going to get something in a brown paper bag and feel like, you know, you've done something dirty because you have a bottle of alcohol?
Well, one of the funny things about the new OCRC, whatever they call it, the weed store, let's say, is that you will have to actually line up. You won't be able to self-serve and browse the way you can at an LCBO or some of the modern renovated beer stores. So it will be a bit of a throwback. It will be puritanical, but that's better than prohibition. And the idea here is that people aren't trying to sprinkle the streets with marijuana. They're trying to get rid of a prohibition model that doesn't work and find the less evil or cumbersome alternative.
Prediction, 5 years from now, it's a budget line in Ontario with a substantial number on it.
I think so. I think it'll be a significant number. There'll be an upfront investment in the capital, in pricing out the black market, being kind of a predatory monopoly seller. And I think in a few years, yeah, the money will be coming in.
All right. Martin, always great to talk to you. Thank you so much for being with
Alan.
me. Still ahead on Focus Ontario, a remarkable